Today I'm going to show you how to make Neapolitan-inspired pizza from start to finish. I've been to Italy a few times and taken some pizza making classes. I'm bringing the knowledge I learned there back here to my home kitchen to apply what I've learned to using a home oven to make a Neapolitan-style pizza with an easy overnight pizza dough and a 5-minute pizza sauce. I've tried a lot of pizza dough recipes, and my favorite has to be Jim Lahey's no-knead pizza dough. For this recipe, you're going to need 500 grams of 00 flour, which is about 3 3/4 of a cup. This type of flour has a high protein content and yields a nice chewy crust, just like you would get in Italy. Next, you'll need 350 grams of lukewarm water, which is about 1.5 cups. Then you'll need 16 grams of sea salt, about 2 teaspoons, and 1 gram of active dry yeast, about 1/4 teaspoon. So I'm just going to mix all of this up with my hands. There's no need to get a spoon dirty because your spoon is just going to get sticky and then you'll have to use your hands to clean all of that off the spoon. So just use your hands to work all of this together until it forms a really shaggy dough. That's it. That's what it'll look like. It'll look really shaggy, but you'll see that as this rises overnight that it will start to bubble up, and it'll get a lot softer and expand out to the sides and up the sides of the bowl. So that's all we need to do at this point. I'll clean my hands off, and then we're going to cover it and let it rest for 12 to 18 hours and work its magic. So this is my soapstone pizza stone. I've had this for about 8 years now, and it makes the most delicious crispy crust. If you can't use a pizza oven and you're using a home oven, it's really important to have one of these to help your pizza crust rise properly and to help it get crispy on the bottom. It's really easy to get one of these, and I'll link some of my favorite ones in the description box below. So we want to preheat this in our oven to the highest temperature that your oven would go. For me, that's 550. So I'm going to head over here and place it in the oven. So I have some pizza dough here that I made last night, and it's ready to go make pizza today. This is what it looks like after it's rested for 12 to 18 hours. As you can see, the dough is a lot looser, it's very sticky, and it's got little bubbles that have formed on the surface. So all we need to do at this point is dump that out onto a floured surface, and then we're just going to knead it just a little bit until it forms a nice dough ball. So I'm going to put that down, and now I'm just going to work it just a little bit. It smells really good. You can tell that the yeast have been active and hard at work, and as you can see, there's a nice stretch and elasticity to the dough, and that's amazing because all we did was mix it together last night and let it sit overnight. So I'm just going to work this into a ball. You just fold the ends in on itself and then turn it over and kind of shape it into a nice dough ball. And then at this point, all we need to do before we can bake our pizza is let the dough rest right here for about 15 minutes. When I was taking my pizza class in Italy, they taught me about San Marzano tomatoes. These are from the San Marzano region of Italy, and they have a low acidity and a nice, very sweet flavor. So when you use these to make homemade tomato sauce, you actually don't have to cook the sauce at all. We're just going to mix a few things together and it'll be ready to go. These tomatoes taste so good on their own, straight out of the can, that you don't need to simmer the sauce over a hot oven for hours. So we're going to start off by putting a whole can of the tomato sauce in this bowl, and then to that we're going to add just a little bit of high quality olive oil, about a tablespoon. What I love about Italian recipes is that they focus on very minimal ingredients but high quality ingredients, so that you only have to use a few things, but it tastes amazing because the ingredients are so high quality. Then we're going to add about a teaspoon of coarse kosher salt, and then about a teaspoon of dried basil. You could also use fresh basil if you want to, and then a couple of cracks of freshly cracked black pepper straight into there. And then the way we're going to mix this sauce is something that I just love. So You want to mix this by hand. Just use your hands to squeeze the tomatoes and mix all of those ingredients together. A little juice may squirt out, so be careful, but that's okay. And the reason you want to do it this way as opposed to blending these up with a blender or food processor is when you crush the tomatoes in a blender or food processor and the seeds are crushed, it can lead to a tomato sauce that's very bitter in flavor. So when the tomatoes are crushed by hand, it keeps the seeds intact and results in a very smooth, balanced tasting sauce that tastes just like what they put on the pizzas in Italy. Okay, our 5-minute sauce is ready, and since this sauce makes enough for several pizzas, what I like to do is freeze it in silicone muffin tray, and it'll take a couple of hours to freeze. And then once it's frozen, I'll pop them out of this tray and freeze them in a freezer-safe container, just like this. So that way I have pizza sauce ready whenever I'm craving pizza. So you'll need about 2 of these silicone discs per medium pizza that you want to make. So I'm gonna keep ladling all of this to prep for the freezer, and then I'll reserve about a half a cup of sauce for our pizza when it's ready to bake. Okay, so our dough has rested a bit and we're ready to roll it out. I've got my dough ball on a sheet of parchment paper that's covered with some flour, and it's nice and soft, and so I'm going to take my fingers starting from about 1 inch and just press them all the way back, leaving about 1 inch border. And then I'm going to flip it over just to ensure that it's not sticky, and I'm going to do that again this way, and then I'll turn it and press my fingers that way. And what we're doing right here is forming a crust around the outside. So then I'm going to use my hands to work inside that circle that I just made with my fingers and slowly start to stretch the dough out. And then at this point, I'm going to take it with my hands and just use my knuckles to slowly stretch it outwards in a circular motion. And then as it starts to get kind of floppy, I'm going to take my hands and just flop it back and forth over the length of my arm. And if it gets kind of uneven at this point, you can always set it down, and start doing this again just to even it out. If you feel like it's stretching too much in any area and it feels like it's gonna tear, you can always put it back down on the counter and even it out with your fingers this way. And these little bubbles are great. That shows you that the yeast is active and it's working, and that crust is gonna bubble up in the oven and get nice and chewy. So in the pizza class that I took in Italy, they said be very careful not to over top your pizza. In America, we like to pile on all the toppings, but for Neapolitan style inspired pizza, you want to keep the toppings nice and light. So we're going to make a margherita pizza today, and we're going to use that easy 5-minute pizza sauce and just spoon it lightly over the dough, not too much, being careful to avoid the outside where the crust is going to form. That looks good. And then we're going to use some fresh mozzarella cheese. And I like to just tear it with my fingers. Sometimes people will use like pre-cut mozzarella where it's nice even circles, but I like for it to look a little more rustic and messy, tearing it with my hands. And I feel like it melts more evenly this way too. So just tear with your hands. You'll use about 1/3 of an 8-ounce mozzarella ball for 1 pizza. And the San Marzano tomatoes have such a lovely flavor that the simpler you keep the ingredients, the better. And so I'm going to add a few leaves of fresh basil from the garden. No need to chop it up, just keep things really easy and rustic. And I'm going to distribute those around the cheese. And then we'll finish with a drizzle of really good quality olive oil right on top for extra flavor. And the last part is optional. I like to add a little sprinkling of crushed red pepper flakes for a little bit of heat. Just go really lightly, but you can skip this part if you don't like spicy. And now we're ready to go. We're ready to pop it in the oven. So at this point, you'd want to use a pizza peel to get your pizza from the counter to the oven. But I'm going to show you a trick in case you're like me and don't have a pizza peel. I have limited space in my kitchen, so I have to be efficient with the types of things that I have. So I'm going to use the back of this baking sheet. And the reason why I rolled it out on parchment paper is so I could just easily slide the pizza from the counter onto my baking sheet, and then it will slide onto the preheated pizza stone in the oven. So let's get it into the oven. Alright, so the pizza took about 5 minutes to bake and it puffed up perfectly. So I'm just going to use some tongs to transfer that. Now it's time for the moment of truth. All that cheesy goodness. This type of pizza I like to fold in. The dough is like a perfect cloud pillow of softness. You see those air bubbles on the side of the crust? That shows how the yeast leavened and worked their way through the dough. It's nice and pillowy. It's just perfect. Just the right amount of crunch. I've got everything you need to make this Neapolitan-inspired pizza listed in the description below, including printable instructions. So you go print those out, come back, and cook along with me. Be sure to check out my playlist for my top 10 best recipes. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Just use your hands to squeeze